Good morning. Today I am going to talk about a subject which I find interesting and yet perplexing, and that is Marilyn Monroe. As a child, I would watch Marilyn Monroe, and I mean, very young child, and always very much admired her. She was born June 1st, 1925. And at 9:32 Pacific Standard Time, Los Angeles, California, and at age 36, it is believed on August 5th, 1962, that she passed from what the coroner says was possibly an accidental overdose, but he was unwilling to commit to that completely. And that's where this mystery begins. So at this time, I have her chart up, which kind of gives us a general overview of what might be going on. And you can see in her first house that she has her sun in, or her Neptune in Leo, and her sun in Gemini in the 10th. Her chart type is called a bucket, and you can see much of her chart at the top, and it looks like a bucket with a handle. Much of her chart is at the top, so she's highly visible. With her sun in the 10th, that is additionally highly visible, and a lot of her chart being disposed of in the end by Mercury. So we will kind of break into that and kind of try to understand what might be going on here. Did she commit suicide or was she murdered? And this is the question I have asked the charts. And in addition to that, I have done what is called an eighth solar harmonic. This video is going to be in at least two parts, if not three, depending on how much ground I can cover each video. Okay, so to start out with, Sunday, August 5th, 1962, at the age of 36, at 4:35 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, the police received a phone call regarding Marilyn Monroe. They came to the home, and the housekeeper, Mrs. Eunice Murray, was there. She was not a live-in housekeeper, and although from time to time she stayed the night, it wasn't her common practice. Also within the home was Dr. Ralph R. Greenson, her psychiatrist, and Dr. Heyman Ellenberg, the internist. It was Dr. Ellenberg who made the call to the police. When she was found, according to police, she was lying face down, unclothed, holding a telephone. They gathered through the coroner's exploration that he was dead for at least 4 hours before the police were contacted. At the time, without any evidence, Dr. Greenson, the psychiatrist, stated that she'd had a fatal accidental overdose without any evidence to really support that, other than supposedly next to the bed was an empty bottle of barbiturates. And so there was an assumption without really any critical thinking, because it's possible that bottle was empty for a while. We don't know. We just don't know. There was no suicide note. The empty Nembutal capsule bottle, yet no water was available. No glass was by the bedside. And so to imagine swallowing a bunch of sleeping pills with no water, that would be difficult. And the house was being remodeled, so there wasn't any water available. Exactly. So the housekeeper, when questioned about all of this, was defensive and uncomfortable and behaved oddly. Her death was assumed to have happened at 11:46 p.m., which would be 11 10 11. Think about this. All these uh 5 1. So something new that was of a chaotic nature and kind of explosive. She was married at age 16 due to the fact that she was a foster child and that her foster parents were very in a hurry to move her along and out of their home. They approved this first marriage at the age of 16. Her second marriage was to Joe DiMaggio in San Francisco, California on June 14th, 1954, only lasting 10 months. And he always remained emotionally and spiritually available to her. Her third marriage was Arthur Miller, which was a 5-year marriage, and divorced January 20th, 1961. They were married June 29th, 1956. So she had married Arthur Miller approximately 2 years after divorcing Joe DiMaggio. Her marriage to Arthur Miller resulted in 2 ectopic pregnancies. The reason is she had endometriosis causing inflammation on her body, and this was she had a fixed T-square, which would contribute in a chronic sense, according to this chart, a condition that she had with her skin. Note that you've got in the 6th house Jupiter, which would be disposed of by Saturn. It's Saturn in the 4th house of family, disposed of by Mars, suggesting there was constant pain and inflammation and things going on within the reproductive organs. She relied on pain medication, which this chart would suggest there was good reason for it. She definitely had, of course, female pain. And she became despondent and depressed, yet doubt about overdose remained. And there's a very good reason. At her autopsy, it was noted that there was an injection point. So was she injected with a fatal dose of medication? Dr. Thomas Noguchi of Los Angeles ruled the death a probable suicide, leaving room for doubt. Mars-Pluto suggests possible murder and violent death, self-undoing, and secret enemies. And so you can note that in her 11th house, you see Mars conjunct Pluto in Cancer. And this is Mars is departing from Pluto or separating from Pluto, like something happened and it moves away from that as her life has been extinguished. So very much a indicator in her natal chart, but we're going to move a step further and we're going to look at her 8th solar harmonics and try to understand the last month of her life to see if we can understand in general why this may have occurred. In suicide charts, we seek the natal ascendant or the first house sign, usually rising at the time of death. So the ascendant degree or first house sign usually rising at the time of death. And that did not occur. So that would indicate an act of self-destruction or self-inflicted. And her death chart does not reflect that, her involvement as an event chart. And so what I did was I did the 8th solar harmonics so that I could look at, in fact, the day before her death so that I could get some kind of fix on what was really happening within her life medically. Was she depressed? Was she suicidal? And quite frankly, her eighth solar harmonics does not show that either. Her natal chart is bucket shaped with air as her dominant. Fixed is regarding her inner planets, most of them at the top and visible. Moon and Jupiter descending. Venus and Chiron. Let's look at that. Okay, Venus and Chiron on the midheaven. Okay, so lots going on here. You can see her Venus in Taurus. Basically, where's her Venus at? Her Venus is in the house of hidden enemies in Gemini, being disposed of by Mercury. So a lot of her chart is going to get cleared out in air by Mercury. So the things she says could be the major contributing factor to her death. And what we know of her story was that, quite frankly, she was very sexually sexy, if you will. Not, I don't know that she was sexual in that sense. I don't have any evidence to really say that in any meaningful way. I think she was sexual to be accepted by the groups. She thought that being sexual was her obligation in the process of life and living as an actress. And it probably was required in lots of ways to get ahead within her field. And so she became involved with John F. Kennedy. I'm going to stop the. All right, to continue, as I said, I had to pause the video. She was John F. Kennedy's lover. Now to carry on, she where we're going to focus is her seventh house of partnerships. And you might notice that the chart isn't here right now because I'm kind of go into the section that myself, why I think that for me, Marilyn Monroe's story is so profound. She, like myself, was a child who was rather unwanted. And although I didn't end up in foster care as young as she did, which was approximately 2 weeks of age, there were other factors that we share in our story. And her seventh house of partnerships, vitality and self-discovery, she had Uranus, where it's just a good deal of upset. And I wouldn't think that having Uranus in your seventh house of partnership, which I do not, I have mine in my eighth house where I have wounding now, was easy for her. And exploitation of her became her way forward. Her mother, at 8 years of age, was diagnosed with schizophrenia. She'd briefly lived with her mother up to around this time and saw her mother being called away to the psychiatric hospital. One of her major goals in life was to become a mother. And her body said no. Saturn and Leo said no. You're not going to be a mother. Now, that's not always an indicator, but it can be. It depends on where it's located and what supports it or doesn't support it. In this case, her chart very much says that for her, having children at best would have been a very difficult endeavor. And due to the fact that she had endometriosis and was having ectopic pregnancies, which means that the egg comes down the tube and gets stuck due to the scarring within the tube. And when you come from a life where you've suffered from things like depression, mental illness, paranoia, low self-esteem, you can pretty well expect that your female organs are going to factor that in, and there is going to be inflammation within your body because, in a sense, we are a combination, both emotional and physical and spiritual as well. She had been in many foster homes before all was said and done. In order for her to make it, 1945, she was working at a munitions manufacturing plant where a photographer basically captured her pictures and made it his feature. And as she was so beautiful and naturally interesting in front of the camera, this was a success not only for him, but it also brought her to the attention of the people. So she then goes on and she has difficulty getting her career started. And one of the reasons she had such a difficult time getting her career started is because of really what it takes to have a career, at least at that time, in acting. You couldn't be a good girl and go anywhere. You had to be willing to sleep with the casting directors and the various people along the way. So after a period of time and her figuring out the details, she then adopted that, gee whiz, I really don't have a choice. And then later, when nude pictures came out about her, one of the first things she did was she just admitted to it. Yes, I had sex with men to get where I needed to go. I was hungry. I needed a paycheck, and I did what I had to do. Now, we as women are kind of taught that having this kind of way forward isn't acceptable, but I'm going to say this, and this might irritate some people, and it could get me some, kind of blowback. But a lot of times we as women do this in the form of marriage. We find a man that's capable of financially supporting us and keeping us warm, dry, and comfortable. And we become, shall I say, dignified prostitutes, but not necessarily happy. And myself, I've been here. I know this routine where I, for the sake of being taken care of in a complex world where my needs weren't exactly being met, I grab hold of the first thing that's called a life raft and I jump on board and I've, I'm essentially like a lot of women. I did what I had to do to survive. And, it for me, it's been kind of, a little rocky, because I also, like Norma Jean or Marilyn Monroe, came from a family where really I was not wanted. There was pathology and mental health issues, and all of it affected me in all kinds of negative ways. So here she was, this young woman looking to get ahead. And it became clear that in Hollywood, in order to get ahead, if you didn't sleep with the various people along the route, you weren't going to get ahead. And so here she is. She's learning how, with all that air she has, a three of swords, how to navigate, how to do the teamwork so that she could have the dream, which was a paycheck of her own, which is what we all want. We want to be able to stand alone and be independent. And I can tell you that I'm 62 and I'm just now starting to strive for independence because I didn't have a career, I didn't have the education, I didn't have the way forward. And it's only been recently that I've gotten this big education and this fancy way forward. COVID started me off after 2019. I was no longer willing to stay as who I'd been in the past. Okay, so I did a lot of work. And what was it for her? It was about her having what she needed financially. It was about a 10 of coins and becoming the happy family. What was her most desired place to be? She wanted to be a mom. She was air dominant. She was fixed. And I half wonder in the back of my mind, to be honest with you, she wasn't somewhat autistic. And I say that, and I know that, she was really out there, but she determined her way that she could be out there was through sexualized behavior, which really only brought her more, in some ways, condemnation and disrespect from men, up to and including both of the Kennedy brothers, who both had sexual relationships with her. And really, at the end of the day, and I'm going to say this, she was not orgasmic. She didn't know an orgasm in her life. So how does that happen? How does that occur? It to me, if there's not a good purpose, why? So yeah. And the last card that I get on there is that this was all about her moon, her subconscious, where she had a lot bothering her. She had a lot of sadness. She had a lot of depression. She had a desire to have something for herself, her own child, but never could accomplish that due to endometriosis. Her life was very much a challenge. And with that, I'm going to stop this portion and I will continue on where I am going to show you how there is no way, in my estimation of things, that she committed suicide, but rather was murdered through an injection, most likely by her psychiatrist or internist, or both of them facilitating this particular process. So with that, please do consider like, share, and subscribe, and joining myself and my lovely co-reader Maha when we can work together. And join us for a reading where we do, in fact, do our readings completely together. So join two medical astrologers with many years of experience in this sense to get your reading today. And thank you so much for joining me here today.